In every part of the world, disasters happen. Earthquakes, tsunamis, flooding, hurricanes, and now the effects of climate change happen with growing force every year. In the Pacific, a large number of island states are extremely vulnerable to disasters. In the Caribbean, another group of islands and other small countries face similar circumstances. In early 2010, a United Nations project called the South-South Cooperation Project was developed to expose disaster risk managers and climate change experts in both regions to what was happening in each other's area, to share information and examine the best practices from each region.
The project has come out of a process of collaboration with both sides in the Pacific and in the Caribbean. And the objective is really for these two regions, although they have differences, they also have many similarities. They similarly confront many different natural hazards, multiple hazards, and they also are deeply vulnerable to issues of climate change.
Through consultations with experts and officials in both regions, UNDP initiated the first phase of a new project of collaboration. Phase 1 involved an initial visit to the Caribbean by Pacific experts and a visit to the Pacific by Caribbean experts. The goal was to see how technical expertise could be transmitted from one region to the other. These consultations were supported through the financial assistance of UNDP's Special Unit for South-South Cooperation and the UNDP Japan Partnership Fund.
I think we're trying to set up a systematic exchange which will lead to something in the future, lay the groundwork for ongoing, more permanent contact between both sides of the world. So that's the purpose of this exchange.
In July 2010, a group of 6 Pacific Island disaster experts from different backgrounds and organizations traveled to the Caribbean. Their first stop, Jamaica. The Pacific delegates met with the country's Office for Disaster and Emergency Management.
Interfacing with this structure that you have in terms of national.
The group was interested to learn about a survey undertaken by the office to gather climate change perceptions from farming and fishing communities. It was thought that a similar survey could be done in the Pacific to help identify coping strategies.
And I think for us, we have honed our mechanism for responding to these events. We've also developed a sense, even at the local level, the community level, for this resilience building. And that's something we can share with a lot of other SIDS in how to get the community involved.
The delegates visited the Rio Cobre flood warning system, where a flood early warning system had recently been established to cover an extensive floodplain on the outskirts of Kingston. The system operates both manually and automatically, relying on trained members of the community to monitor and provide warnings.
What stood out for me in Jamaica was just how well organized the agencies were at the national level, and just how they communicate their counterparts at the municipality level as well as the community level. It was surprising that the challenges that they faced as well there in terms of trying to get initiatives underway at the community level were very much similar to what we face in the Pacific.
The next stop for the Pacific group was Cuba. The group first met with Cuba's National Civil Defense. It was explained to the delegation how Cuba's civil defense took responsibility for coordinating efforts for many kinds of emergencies and disasters. The delegates heard how civil defense worked at the national level, but linked in closely with those responsible at the municipal level as well.
So I was really impressed with the cooperation that they had, and also the assistance that the state is giving to them. And that's one of the things that I was impressed, is the commitment from the leaders to address the disaster risk reduction in climate change.
The Cuban civil defense's success at preventing casualties during extreme disasters has defined Cuba as a world leader in disaster management. From civil defense, the group then traveled to Los Palacios, where they visited a municipal risk reduction management center. The center manages territorial risk information for planning and preparedness purposes. Cuba's municipal government works with individual families who are affected by disasters and channel government assistance to help them to rebuild.
That is, it's a relationship, an association of the families with the state.
The group also visited a small-scale brick-making industry that supported local livelihoods. And they viewed a new community of 35 hurricane-resistant houses which had been set up as part of the 2008 hurricane recovery process. In Bacunagua, a small community of 2,500 people, the group learned how this small vulnerable community had communication links with the municipal center. A delegation then met with INSMET, Cuba's National Institute of Meteorology. They toured the INSMET facility, observing the satellite imagery and radar system that the institute uses for accurate weather forecasting. INSMET stressed the role that meteorologists played in reducing risk by providing clear, simple and calm messages to the public.
It is like a triangle in which there is a strong, very strong partnership and cooperation between the civil defense in one vortex, the meteorological service in the other, and the media in the other end. With this cooperation, every one of them makes its role a reality.
Y como nosotros somos pequeños estados insulares con pocos recursos, la cooperación es imprescindible para poder tener unos servicios meteorológicos mucho más eficientes de lo que solamente podríamos hacer por nuestros propios esfuerzos. El papel del PNUD como facilitador de esta labor de cooperación sur-sur es sumamente también importante, porque naturalmente los países solos no podrían trabajar sin alguien que facilite eso.
The Pacific Group were quite impressed with Cuba's system of early warning and its monitoring facilities.
The other issue as well in Cuba is the way how the communication works from top, bottom up, because they know exactly what to do. So if there is a disaster coming, people will told and they will move. Maybe this is due to the very good awareness system that they have. So that's what probably we need to learn from them.
Within the community, there are also probably intrinsic factors that you don't really see from the national perspective, but as soon as you go down into the community level, that things like traditional views, cultural views, that you would not normally think about when you're planning these things out.
And I was really impressed by their warning systems, all the way to the last person. And they're all arranged, pre-arranged process, and they practice it every now and then.
Especially the way they give training at different level for technical people, policymaker people, at any level. I think this is incredible.
From Cuba, the Pacific Group traveled to Barbados, where the first stop was at the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agency, or SEDEMA.
The nature of disaster management is changing so fast, and the efforts to involve other people means there must be some common framework.
The group took advantage of SEDEMA's staff to discuss challenges and achievements in implementing the Hyogo framework for action in the region. They also discussed how to build community resilience and advance gender-sensitive risk reduction strategies. Next was a meeting with the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, where the group was shown the methodologies for assessing hydrometeorological hazards.
They have the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology. They have the Caribbean Meteorological Organization. They also have the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Agency. And it's all tied into one kind of umbrella that ensures that a sustainable number of specialized people are trained on a regular basis.
At the next stop, the Coastal Zone Management Unit, the group was shown tsunami modeling complete with alert systems and storm surges.
And we make our decisions based
We sort of face the similar hazards. The topography is similar. volcanic islands raised, vulnerable low-lying population. They have the same issues around getting good quality data to do their risk modeling. So, and I mean, this is the same challenges, the cost of actually acquiring baseline data.
The final stop for the group was just a short trip away, the island of St. Lucia. There, the group met with the NEMO Secretariat, the National Emergency Management Office.
You never know what skill set you're going to need, and everyone has something to bring to the table.
What struck me in St. Lucia was their NEMO, the National Emergency Management Office, the proactiveness of Dawn, the director, as well as the volunteer support, which is, it seems very strong as they presented to us from St. Lucia.
Gender equality in disaster preparedness and response was highlighted during their NEMO visit. The vast majority of NEMO's community-level volunteers were women, who assisted in preparedness and planning. The men played a more active role in assisting after disaster strikes.
You'll see all the men coming out from wherever they are. They will be involved.
I mean, they recognize that in terms of planning, the women play a more prominent role, but in terms of response, it's the men. So just recognizing these responsibilities, cultural responsibilities, and making the most of that was actually quite good, yeah.
The women were very participating, you know, they were telling stories of what they've been doing, and so that's something that's we need to, you know, instill in our people, that we have to be interested in the disaster risk management.
The group were able to visit the monitoring station on St. Lucia's volcano. The delegation heard how the volcano posed a serious threat to communities on the island, but they were shown how, with careful monitoring and disaster preparedness plans, that threat was reduced.
So this is the communication, it's just a satellite there.
St. Lucia was the delegation's final stop in the Caribbean. As the group prepared to return to the Pacific, they reflected on the many new ideas and institutions they saw. They also pondered the bigger picture of how the Caribbean was dealing with similar disasters that they faced in their region.
It was actually quite nice to see them using low technology solutions as well, which, I mean, for us is something that we could definitely explore.
In August 2010, the next phase of the South-South project began. A group of 5 Caribbean disaster risk managers made the trip to the Pacific to share experiences with their Pacific colleagues. A regional Pacific platform meeting was convened in Suva that coincided with the visit by the Caribbean delegation. This meeting not only gave them a chance to hear from their Pacific colleagues, but also to share their experiences from the Caribbean.
I learned on the first day that I need to start asking questions about how people receive information instead of taking it for granted that it's going to be a poster, a flyer, a newspaper article.
When you start to think in terms of the Barbados Programme of Action, when you start to think in terms of MXI...
The delegation then visited SOPAC, the Pacific Islands Applied Geoscience Commission, where the scientists and researchers gave a presentation on how this regional organization provided research and disaster assessments for all the countries of the Pacific.
It was very interesting that in the Pacific you have it under one roof, while in the Caribbean we have the same sorts of activities but in 3 different agencies. So I thought it very interesting and very innovative that you have it under one umbrella.
Basically, SOPAC is ahead of us. And I've always been fascinated by their work, so for me getting there and seeing and meeting with the scientists who are engaged in producing that kind of work is excellent. But sometimes it's not just the sophistication of the technology you need to be able to connect it to the people who need to hear it.
South-South sharing and education was another issue discussed by the group. One of the Caribbean delegates admitted that several years before, they had been heavily influenced by the Pacific's university degree program on climate change.
In the Caribbean, we were developing a master's program in climate change several years ago, and we learned that the University of the South Pacific had a program. So we took their syllabus, took it to the Caribbean, developed it, and then we have been running it for the 7 years, but it has died here. So again, it's sort of, we have to give it back to the Pacific, what we stole from you.
Perhaps the highlight of the delegation's trip to the Pacific was a visit to Ngunu village in Fiji's Yasawa Islands. The Yasawas were usually the first to experience the numerous tropical cyclones that visit the Fiji group of islands.
They are very vulnerable in the area where their community is the path of the cyclone that comes into the Fiji group. So majority of the time, they are the first community that are attacked by the hurricane as it comes down to the islands of Fiji.
I'd heard about the challenges faced by these communities and the challenge that the various managers have in responding and preparing these villagers for disasters. And it had me perplexed for a while. But having traveled a long distance, I can appreciate the reason for the on-the-ground training that is required here.
The delegates met with village leaders and others in the community who were responsible for preparing the village for disasters. The delegation was told how the government, together with regional organizations, helped the community prepare for disasters.
And we have to go into every villages and meet with the communities and help them start up their disaster risk reduction committees in every villages and help them facilitating with them the programs of disaster risk reduction in every villages.
Traditional knowledge had taught those in the village what signs to look for that might foretell about a potential cyclone.
As people in the early days, when they see the breadfruit, there's 3 breadfruit in one branch, that's the sign of the cyclone.
The village also had traditional activities that helped prepare the village for a cyclone. The village members themselves, with outside assistance, prepared a disaster preparedness manual using both traditional knowledge and more modern ideas that was orally explained to everyone in the village.
Projects require us to report, so we have to have a document to report on as a verification document. But that may not be the best tool within the community. The community has an oral tradition, so somehow or the other we have to get that oral tradition back into the emergency plans.
What I liked about it is that the people themselves understood that they had to convert that into a talking point in the community, that they had to tell the story of the plan for it to be able to sink in.
Here it's not only the risk to disasters, but the development issues associated with that as well. So the disaster is just one of many issues faced by these communities. It's been a reminder that disaster management is not just disaster management, it's a development issue.
Global warming was another potential disaster that the village had to consider in the near future, especially because of the village's close proximity to the ocean.
With creeping sea level rise, this whole area is going to be at risk, as is the first set of housing and the back housing here. So it's not something we can ignore, even if we're not measuring the signs of it right now.
The Caribbean delegates saw firsthand the vulnerability that rural communities like Ngunu had, and how their preparations for disaster had to be very self-reliant.
They are very far away from the mainland. Getting emergency supplies to them would be a challenge, so these people have to be self-sufficient.
Following their visit to the Yasawas, the Caribbean delegation had time to reflect on what they had seen and how those observations could be used in their own region.
We have to find a way to also ensure that the community takes part in the measurement of that change, so that they also learn what is going on in their environment and are able to communicate that to others.
How do we get the community involved in the process? That has been a challenge for us. We have tended to take the approach of a top-down and not enough from hearing from the community. And I noticed that that's a very strong component here. And I think that is something that we need to be able to take back to the Caribbean to get the community more involved in designing their own disaster preparedness plan.
For both the Caribbean and Pacific delegations, the South-South project proved to be a way to share ideas and share experiences. The first-hand look at each other's institutions, monitoring systems, and public awareness programs proved invaluable to develop more understanding and borrow workable ideas.
I've learned so much from the disaster risk reduction side and how they do it in Cuba. And I can use that information and then go to Palau and then make it Palawanized.
There's a whole lot of new information that has been brought back from this visit. That is what we'll be trying to do, is to try and fit it to our our local situation.
The South-South Exchange presented experts from both regions with specific examples and best practices that they could compare and use as models for their own region.
Este tipo de intercambio, como se vio en el tema de coordinación interinstitucional, que es uno de los mayores retos para unir la adaptación al cambio climático y el manejo de riesgo ante desastres naturales.
People are informed, they're more aware, they make their own decision how to reduce the risk that they are dealing with.
The end result, I think, is that we have established contact points between disaster preparedness personnel in the Caribbean and their counterparts in the Pacific.
Entonces, ahí esa es la regla básica en la que se basa eso, y aprender mutuamente uno de los otros porque compartimos las mismas dificultades.
Also, I think the real challenge is beyond that initial excitement and all these things that come out, different ideas that come forward. Because this is just the beginning. I think it has a lot of potential, but we have to ensure that we do make good on that promise.